the Law of One Breakdown channel. Have you ever wondered what the raw material actually says about Jesus, free will, sexuality, and even hair? Each week we go straight to the original sessions and explore one topic through the pure wisdom of the Law of One. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this subject. Let's begin. Hello, in this episode I'm going to be talking about the higher self, or the Oversoul, and what Ra has to say about that. And just to give a quick recap on densities, real quick, because in order to understand higher self, one needs to understand the densities and which one you're in right now, or which one your higher self is in, and what all that means. So, as planets, and let's just use Earth as an example, since we're here right now, is spiraling slowly but surely towards the galactic core, it also corresponds to the times, if you will, that will be in these different densities. And so this slide represents first density is in the red, and this is not to scale by any means, but it's, according to Ra, about 2 billion years long. And if you don't have any idea what I'm talking about with the densities, I highly suggest you watch the videos that I made enter the densities, and I do first, second, and then third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh and eighth. And that will give you a nice recap, and you'll understand what all this means. But anyway, first density on planet Earth, let's say, was about 2 billion years, and we were at a certain point in space, again, slowly but surely spiraling towards that galactic core. And then after that ended, then Earth turned into a second density planet. And that lasted for 4.6 billion years. And then over time, we became third density planet, which is what we're in the tail end of now. And it's a very small amount of time, 75,000 years. That's it. And we're at the tail end of that, and we're moving into fourth density. Okay, so, and I'm not going to go through the rest of them. But if you do watch those videos, you'll have a better understanding of what this all means. Now, when Ra says the mind-body-spirit complex, Ra's talking about us in our physical bodies here in space-time versus time-space. And this next slide will show you that space-time is when we incarnate onto planets in whatever density. It's called space-time. And it's literally what we know of as space in this part of the galaxy. And time-space is the metaphysical space, or the soul space, and Ra calls it time-space. And that's what all that means. And so, as I start going through these slides, Dawn's going to be asking a lot of questions about our higher self, which is in mid-sixth density. And that's why I did this little recap, so that when you start talking about the densities, you'll understand. And Earth, again, is at the tail end of that 75,000 year in third density. We're moving into fourth density. Apparently, Earth is already in fourth density space. It's just the consciousness level here on Earth hasn't quite caught up with the region of space that we're in. And that's why there's a lot of turmoil right now. It tends to be like that in a mixed harvest. And if you don't know what I mean by harvest, I also made another video about that. And it's basically the transition from one density to the next and being harvested into the next density. Because not everybody will be harvested into fourth density, because if their consciousness level just isn't where it needs to be, then they'll do a repeat of a third density planet. Probably not Earth, but maybe. We're going through this transition and it might take a while. Okay, let's get started. Okay, in session 36.9, Dawn asks, is the higher self of every entity of a sixth density nature? And Ra says, this is correct. This is an honor/duty of self to self as one approaches seventh density. In session 70.10, Dawn asks, am I correct in assuming that all of the mind-body-spirit complexes, i.e. people, that exist in the levels below mid-sixth density have a higher self in mid-sixth density? Is this correct? And Ra says, this is correct. No, your oversoul or your higher self literally is existing in sixth density right now as you exist at the tail end of third. And that goes for all the densities. So there's a version of your soul that's in fourth density and fifth density and sixth density. And then we'll get into the seventh at the very end. Okay, in session 36.6, Dawn asks, then the higher self operates from the future as we understand things. In other words, my higher self would operate from what I consider to be my future. Is this correct? And Ross says, from the standpoint of your space-time, this is correct. Because we have the concept of moving through time and space, that's why it's correct. In the higher densities, when we transcend the erroneous belief of time such as we understand it, then that probably would be understood in a totally different way. Okay, in session 70.11, Dawn asks, would an analogy for this situation be that the individual's higher self is manipulating to some extent, shall I say, the mind-body-spirit complex? That is, its analog, you might say, to move it through the lower densities for purposes of gaining experience and then finally transferring that experience or amalgamating it, you might say, in mid-sixth density with the higher self. And Ra says this is incorrect. The higher self does not manipulate its past selves. It protects when possible and guides when asked. But the force of free will is paramount. The seeming contradictions of determinism and free will melt when it is accepted that there is such a thing as true simultaneity. The higher self is the end result of all the development experienced by the mind-body-spirit complex to that point. And I'll just throw out, a while back when I was actually starting to read up on the higher self again and kind of familiarize myself with it, I thought, well, gosh, I usually, if I'm going to, quote, pray or ask for something, I say, oh, positively polarized beings of a higher nature, could you help me, blah, blah, blah. But I decided, well, I'm just going to call on my higher self. Because, after all, it's part of me. It's my soul, part of my soul. And I'm part of it. And to say it hasn't been profound would be an understatement. It has been so interesting. And I really feel like I've made a stronger connection with my higher self, if you will. It's been pretty mind-blowing, actually. I highly suggest people, if you resonate with this and it seems like it's the truth for you, and I do believe it's the truth because I do believe that the Ra folks, in their understanding in sixth density, they have a broader understanding than we do here, and I tend to believe them. And so if this really resonates with you, just start calling on yourself, your higher self, for help or for this or for that. A lot of times I can't sleep, And so lately I've just been saying, hey, higher self, can you do me a solid and put this body to sleep, please? And boom, like more often than not, I just go right to sleep. And that just doesn't happen on its own. So that's one of the many, many, many things that has been interesting and enlightening, if you will, about getting to know my higher self or letting my higher self know me more. Or we know each other even better. Okay, in session 70.9, Dawn asks, I think I have an erroneous concept of the mind-body-spirit complex. For instance, that I represent here in this density and my higher self in that the concept probably comes from my concept of space and time. I am going to try to unscramble it. The way I see it right now is that I am existing in two different locations, here and in mid-sixth density, simultaneously. Is this correct? And Ross says, you are existing at all levels simultaneously. It is specifically correct that your higher self is you, mid-sixth density. And in your way of measuring what you know of as time, your higher self is your self in your future. Some of these slides are very similar, but like I've said before, a lot of times Don will ask the same questions because sometimes these aren't the same sessions and he's going back and asking kind of the same question over and over. It seems that Ra always has a little bit more to say about things and you get a broader picture. Okay, in session 37.6, Dawn asks, in that case, we'll go ahead with the questions we have here, continuing the last session. You said that each third density entity has a higher self in the sixth density, which is moving to the mind-body-spirit complex of the entity as needed. Does this higher self also evolve in growth through the densities, beginning with the first density? And does each higher self have a corresponding higher self advanced in densities beyond it? Good question. And Ross says, to simplify this concept is our intent. The higher self is a manifestation given to the late sixth density mind-body-spirit complex as a gift from its future selfness. The mid-seventh density's last actions before turning towards the allness of the Creator and gaining spiritual mass is to give this resource to the sixth density self, moving as you will measure time in the stream of time. This self, the mind-body-spirit complex of late sixth density, has then the honor/duty of using both the experiences of its total living bank or memory of experienced thoughts and actions, and using the resource of the mind-body-spirit complex totality, I'll get into that in a minute, left behind as a type of infinitely complex thought form. And it continues on. Again, this is session 37.6. In this way, you may see yourself, your higher self or oversoul, and your mind-body-spirit complex totality as 3 points in a circle. The only distinction is that of your time-space continuum. All are the same being. So in this slide, I just quickly put together, I didn't put all the densities in there because I actually made the slide for a different video. But as you can see, the seventh density U is called the mind-body-spirit complex totality. And then your higher self or oversoul is in the sixth density. And then there's a version in fifth and fourth. But in this case, I'm just going to talk about us here at the tail end of third and moving into fourth. And that's the mind-body-spirit complex. I know some of the lingo can get complicated at times, but if you keep reading, it will sink in, I promise you. Because the first while that I was reading The Law of One, I kept going, oh, what is that again? And I'd have to go back and try to figure it out. But over time, it does start to sink in. Okay. And this is the second to the last slide I have. As you can see, session 70 and session 36 have a lot to say about the higher self. Now, the higher self is also mentioned throughout other sessions, but these two were very predominant. And I promised the folks at LL Research that I wouldn't use whole sessions when I was making these. And so that's why I kind of split it up here and there. And but if anyone's really wanting to dive deep into the higher self or oversoul, look at session 36 and look at session 70. Okay. Dawn asks in session 70.12, then what we are looking at is a long path of experience through the densities up to mid-sixth density, which are a function totally of free will and results in the awareness of the higher self in mid-sixth density. But since time is illusory and there is a, shall I say, unification of time and space, or an eradication of what we think of as time, then all of this experience that results in the higher self, the cause of the evolvement through the densities, is existing while the evolvement takes place, since it's all simultaneous. Is this correct? And Ross says, we refrain from speaking of the correctness due to our understanding of concepts of metaphysical existence in time-space, which is precisely as much of yourself as is space-time. All times are simultaneous, just as in your geography, your cities and villages are all functioning, bustling, and alive with entities going about their business at once. So it is in time-space with the self. So that's interesting. I had to sit there and ponder this for quite some time when I was going through these slides. And I don't think I'm going to say much about that because it really gets me thinking deeply. And again, here's your space-time, time-space. And I've mentioned these books before, Journey of the Soul and whatnot by Michael Newton. And he basically paints a picture of time-space, or he calls it LBL space, life between lives space, as, bustling with lots of activity, all the different levels and there's a lot going on in time-space, just like there's a lot going on in space-time, just two different ways of representing oneself, but all experience nonetheless. So, that's all I've got for this, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this opens some eyeballs up to higher self or oversoul. And call on yourself, because I guarantee it's been profound, and it just seems so comfortable too, because I'm just calling on myself to help myself. And I think of it in a totally different way than when I would call on, let's say, a positively polarized being for some kind of understanding in something or help with something, It's more, I don't know, intimate's not the right word, but it's more, I don't know. I don't have the right word for it. But it's, I'm doing it more and more, and I highly suggest giving it a whirl. Okay, I hope you enjoy this, and take care, everybody.